Eli Grayson stood at the edge of the field just as the first pale light of dawn began to bleed into the sky. The farm stretched before him, rows of withered stalks and cracked earth, whispering a silent accusation. His breath hung in the cold morning air, mingling with the mist that curled low over the ground like ghostly fingers trying to clutch at the dying crops. He knelt, fingers pressing into the soil, searching for any sign of life beneath the brittle surface. But the earth was unforgiving, dry and cracked, refusing to yield even the smallest sprout. He sighed, the weight of years pressing down on him like the heavy clouds gathering above. "Not this year," he muttered, voice rough with fatigue. The farm had been his inheritance and his burden, a legacy passed down through generations of Graysons, each struggling to coax sustenance from the stubborn black hollow soil. But this season, the fields were fallow, and the desperation in Eli's chest grew with every empty harvest. Mara's voice called softly from the farmhouse. "Eli, breakfast's getting cold." He stood and wiped his hands on his worn jeans, the fabric rough against his skin. Turning back toward the house, he spotted Mara at the porch, her strong features drawn with worry. She held a steaming cup of coffee, the aroma mingling with the faint scent of wood smoke drifting from the chimney. Inside, the kitchen was dim, the morning light struggling through the thin curtains. Mara watched him closely as he sank into the chair, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and fear. "The corn's barely up this year," she said quietly. "I don't know what we're going to do." Eli nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'll find a way," he promised, though the certainty felt brittle. The day unfolded with the relentless rhythm of farm life. Eli moved through the land, inspecting the fields, noting the strange patterns in the soil. Here and there, he spotted twisted roots that seemed to writhe just beneath the surface, like veins pumping some dark essence into the earth. The crops that did manage to grow bore sickly fruits, pale and misshapen. At night, strange noises disturbed his sleep, the rustling of unseen things in the fields. Whispers carried on the wind that sounded almost like voices. Word had spread through the nearby town, and at the diner, Eli felt the weight of whispered rumors and wary glances. Old-timers muttered about Black Hollow's cursed soil, a whispered legend of ancestors who had fed the land with blood to keep it fertile. Eli dismissed the tales as superstition, but the unease gnawed at him. Back at the farm, Mara urged him to rest, to let go of the obsession that was eating him alive. But Eli's mind was a storm of questions and fears. He couldn't shake the feeling that the land itself was watching, waiting, demanding something he didn't yet understand. As night deepened, Eli stepped outside once more. The moon cast a pale glow over the barren fields, shadows stretching like fingers through the rows. From the soil came a faint whisper, a susurrus of voices, long dead but not forgotten. Eli's heart pounded as he listened, caught between dread and determination. The harvest was failing, the land crying out in hunger. But hunger for what? Eli Grayson had always known the land beneath his feet was different. But that night, as he crouched beside a freshly tilled patch of earth, the difference became impossible to ignore. The soil, dark and rich, was warmer than it should have been for early spring. His fingers brushed the surface, and a faint, almost imperceptible murmur rose to his ears. He froze, heart hammering, listening. The sound was like 1,000 whispered voices, too soft to decipher, yet insistent, tugging at the edges of his consciousness. He pulled back his hand, swallowing a dry gulp. "It's just the wind," he muttered to himself, but the lie felt hollow. The farm had been failing him, the crops stunted and sickly, and now the land itself seemed alive with secrets. Eli's mind raced back to the stories his father used to tell, tales of the earth's hunger and the sacrifices that had once been made. He'd dismissed those as superstition, old wives' tales for desperate times. But those whispers, there was something else, something darker beneath the surface. Eli stayed until his hands were raw, turning the soil, listening to the growing chorus that seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat. Night had settled in fully, the sky a blanket of stars that did nothing to comfort him. He heard the soft crackle of dry leaves behind him and spun around, but no one was there. Just the fields vast and silent, except for those whispers. Days passed, and Eli found himself drawn back to the fields at night, unable to resist the pull. Mara watched him with increasing concern. One evening, as the twilight bled into darkness, she found him again, hands dirty, eyes wild, standing amid rows of half-dead stalks. "Eli," she said softly, stepping closer, "you need to rest. This obsession, it's tearing you apart. The farm, the soil. Whatever's happening, it's not worth losing yourself over." He turned to her, the weight of sleepless nights etched into his face. "I can't stop, Mara. Something's wrong with the land. It's alive, in a way I don't understand. I hear it. The soil speaks to me." Mara's brow furrowed. "That's not the man I married. You're chasing shadows. We have Sarah to think about." Eli nodded, guilt twisting in his gut. He wanted to reassure her, to say it was all in his head, but the whispers haunted his every step. At night, when the house was still, he could swear he heard them seeping through the floorboards, calling his name, telling him to dig deeper. One such night, under a crescent moon, Eli ventured further into the fields than ever before. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic like blood. The shadows among the crops stretched unnaturally long, twisting and writhing as if alive. The whispers grew louder, urgent, pleading. Kneeling, Eli pressed his palm to the ground. The soil beneath him trembled slightly, and a cold shiver ran up his spine. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. The voices seemed to swell, overlapping in a cacophony of sorrow, warning, and hunger. Eli's vision blurred, memories not his own flooding his mind, faces of ancestors long gone, their eyes hollow, their hands stained with earth and blood. The land was feeding, always feeding, and it demanded more. He staggered back toward the house, heart racing, breath ragged. Mara was waiting on the porch, her eyes wide with concern. "You're scaring me," she said, grabbing his arm. Eli looked at her, torn between the desire to protect and the pull of the cursed soil. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but I have to find out what this means. For us, for the farm." Mara's grip tightened. "Just promise me you won't lose yourself to it." Eli nodded, but inside, the whispering earth was already claiming more of him. The night had changed everything. The soil was no longer just dirt and nutrients, it was a living thing, hungry and patient, waiting for Eli to uncover the terrible truth it was rooted in. As dawn broke, painting the fields in a ghostly light, Eli stood alone at the edge of the farm, the whispers fading but never gone. Somewhere beneath the surface, the earth was watching, waiting, and Eli Grayson knew that the struggle for his family's legacy was only just beginning. But the question lingered, dark and heavy. What price would the land demand next? The days that followed blurred into a tense rhythm. Eli's obsession deepened. Each time he stepped into the fields, the soil seemed to pulse beneath his boots, alive with that eerie whispering. He began marking spots where the sounds were strongest, digging small holes, testing the earth's reaction to his touch. The crops near these areas showed slight improvement, greener, more robust. But Eli knew better than to trust such appearances. Mara's patience wore thin. One evening, after a long silence, she confronted him again in the dim light of their kitchen. "Eli, this has to stop. You're pushing us all to the edge. Sarah's getting weaker, and you're chasing ghosts." He shook his head, voice low but firm. "No, Mara. The soil is trying to tell me something. I can feel it. If I don't listen, we'll lose everything." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. At what cost? "We're losing you, Eli. The farm means nothing if we don't have you." The words hit harder than any storm. Eli felt the weight of his choices pressing down, but the land's call was relentless. He was caught between a legacy built on blood and sacrifice, and a family slipping through his fingers. That night, as he lay awake, the whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. Eli closed his eyes, trying to steel himself. The land was hungry, and he was the only one who could feed it. The question was, how far was he willing to go to save Black Hollow? The whispering soil waited patiently for his answer. The sun had long dipped beneath the horizon, leaving Black Hollow steeped in twilight shadows that clung to the crooked shapes of weather-beaten barns and skeletal trees. Eli Grayson stood beneath the eaves of his old barn, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting wood. His hands, rough and stained from years of toil, worked methodically, prying loose a stubborn board that had long since surrendered to rot. The soft scrape of wood on wood echoed faintly in the stillness, punctuated only by the distant cry of a nightbird and the whisper of wind threading through cracked window panes. For weeks, the farm had been slipping through Elis's fingers like dry soil, crops failing to take root, the land seeming to recoil from his touch. Tonight, driven by a restless urge he barely understood, Eli searched the barn for anything that might offer a clue, a reason, a solution. As the last plank came free, a cold breath of stale air escaped from the narrow cavity behind it. There, nestled in the dark recess, lay a leather-bound book, its surface cracked and faded with age. Eli's fingers trembled as he lifted the journal free, a cloud of dust rising like a ghost from its pages. The dim glow of the lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows over the brittle, yellowed leaves. The spine creaked softly as he opened it, revealing swirling, cramped handwriting that twisted and turned across the pages, punctuated by sketches of strange symbols and cryptic annotations. Elis's eyes skimmed the opening entries, mostly mundane records of planting and harvest dates. Weather notes, but soon the tone shifted. The words grew darker, the entries more erratic. References to rituals, to offerings, to blood. An archaic language mingled with English, hinting at something unholy beneath the surface of the land they had called home for generations. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Mara standing in the barn's doorway, her eyes wide and sharp in the lantern light. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low but edged with concern. "A journal," Eli said, voice rough with disbelief. "Belonged to my great-grandfather, it seems." Mara stepped closer, her gaze drifting over the pages he held. "What does it say?" Eli hesitated, then read aloud, his voice catching as he recited words that felt like curses. "The earth thirsts for blood, for the lifeblood of those who came before. Only through sacrifice shall the soil yield its bounty. The pact binds us, and through it we prosper." Mara's breath hitched. Sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice? Eli flipped the page, revealing hastily scrawled passages describing midnight rites, the spilling of blood into furrows freshly tilled, and warnings inked in trembling script about the curse that clung to their soil like a shadow. The land, it seemed, was nourished not by rain or sun, but by the blood of ancestors who bound themselves to it in a desperate bargain long ago. A cold shiver ran down Eli's spine as the wind howled outside, rattling the barn's timbers and stirring the brittle leaves in scattered piles. The night seemed to press closer, the dark whisper of the cursed earth breathing through the cracks and seams. Mara reached out, her hand steady on Eli's shoulder, grounding him in the midst of terror and revelation. What do we do now? Eli closed the journal slowly, the weight of generations settling heavy on his chest. I don't know, he admitted, eyes dark and distant. But I have to find out. The barn fell silent, save for the creak of wood and the restless sighs of the land. Outside, the shadows lengthened, and the earth waited hungry and patient. As Eli lay awake that night, the journal's words echoed in his mind, a relentless chant blending with the creaking of the old house and the distant rustle of restless soil. The legacy of Black Hollow was no longer a whisper in the wind. It had become a roar within his blood, demanding answers, sacrifices, and perhaps salvation. Mara's steady presence beside him was the only light in the encroaching darkness, yet even her warmth could not quell the growing dread that the soil beneath their feet was alive with hunger, and that the secrets buried within the pages of the journal were only the beginning of a nightmare that had yet to unfold. What sacrifices will the land demand next? And how far will Eli go to protect the farm and his family from the cursed legacy unearthed this night? The answers, like the soil, lie buried just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Eli Grayson stood at the edge of the field as twilight bled into night. The sky a bruised purple above the rows of struggling crops. The earth beneath his boots was damp and cold, soaked from the day's sporadic rain. He knelt slowly, feeling the soil crumble between his fingers, soft yet stubbornly unyielding, a far cry from the fertile ground his family once knew. His gaze flickered to the knife he'd brought with him, its blade dull but steady in the fading light. A deep breath filled his lungs, steadying a trembling hand. The weight of desperation pressed heavy on his chest. The farm was failing, and the old ways, the whispered secrets buried in his grandfather's journal, left him no other choice. With a sharp, practiced motion, Eli sliced the palm of his hand. The sting was sharp but fleeting, and soon a bead of bright red blood welled and dripped onto the earth. He leaned closer, watching as the soil greedily drank the drops, the tiny holes seeming to pulse, sucking deeper into the ground. For the land, Eli muttered under his breath, as if the words themselves could seal a pact beyond time. As the blood seeped, a strange warmth spread through his fingers, a low vibration that thrummed beneath the surface. The air around him thickened, charged with an unseen energy that prickled his skin. The crops, once tired and brittle, began to stir. Eli watched in a mix of awe and horror as the green stalks grew thicker, their leaves unfurling with unnatural vigor. A whisper rose on the wind, faint at first, a susurration that seemed to carry voices, soft and sorrowful, like echoes trapped between worlds. His breath caught. What have I done? That night, sleep eluded him. The haunting visions began as shadows creeping at the edges of his vision, but soon grew vivid and unrelenting. Pale figures emerged from the twilight mists of the fields, translucent but unmistakably human ancestors who had fed the earth with their lives. Their hollow eyes bore into Eli's soul, filled with sorrow, accusation, and a chilling acceptance of their fates. Eli's mind swirled with their silent pleas and warnings. He staggered to the kitchen, the weight of their spectral presence pressing on his heart. Mara stood by the stove, the soft glow casting sharp shadows on her worried face. When she saw him, her eyes widened, a mix of fear and frustration flooding her features. "Eli," she said quietly, "what are you doing to yourself? To us, this isn't the way." He shook his head, voice rough. "I had to try, Mara. The crops there, alive again. The land wants something, and it's not just water or fertilizer, it's blood." Her hands clenched at her sides. "There's always a price. I'm scared of what this is doing to you, to our family. This obsession is tearing us apart." The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken fears and the heavy burden of a dark legacy. Outside, the wind carried those sorrowful whispers across the fields, as if the earth itself mourned the sacrifices it had claimed and the ones yet to come. Eli knew this was only the beginning. The cursed soil had tasted blood and it hungered for more. He was trapped in a cycle older than memory, and the path ahead was drenched in shadows and sacrifice. But for now, with the crops flourishing and the night closing in, all he could do was brace himself for the storm to come. The kitchen was heavy with the scent of stale coffee and the faint, lingering aroma of earth from Eli's overalls. Mara stood by the small window, the pale morning light casting shadows across her sharp features. She watched Eli as he moved about the cramped space, his hands trembling slightly as he pored over the worn pages of the family journal. The words, cryptic and sinister, weighed on his mind, and Mara could see it in the tight line of his jaw and the dark circles beneath his tired eyes. "Eli," she said quietly, her voice steady but edged with fear. "This isn't the man I married. The farm the way you're talking about, it's like it's consuming you. And those sacrifices you're speaking of, I'm scared, not just for the farm, but for us, for Sarah." Eli looked up, his eyes clouded with a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. "I'm trying, Mara. You think I want this. The crops, they're responding. For the first time in years, the soil is alive again, but it's hungry. It needs more. If I don't feed it, everything we've built dies." Mara crossed her arms, stepping closer. "At what cost, Eli? How many more sacrifices? How much more pain? This isn't just about the crops. It's about you slipping away from us." He slammed his fist on the wooden table, the sound echoing sharply in the small room. "You don't understand. This land, it's cursed, yes, but it's our legacy. If I let it go, we lose everything. I can't just walk away from it." The tension between them grew palpable, the silence stretching as Mara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Outside, the fields that had been barren for so long now seemed to writhe beneath a grey sky, shadows lengthening as if the earth itself was listening to their argument. "Eli," Mara whispered, reaching out to touch his arm, "I love you. But this obsession is going to destroy us if you don't stop." He looked down at her hand, then back into her steady gaze. For a moment, doubt flickered behind his hardened resolve. But the hunger in the soil, the whispers in the night, the visions of ancestors lost to the earth, they all called to him, pulling him deeper into the darkness. "I have to try," he said finally, voice low and broken. "For all our sakes." Mara nodded slowly, her heart heavy. She knew the road ahead was fraught with peril, but she would stand by him even as the shadows closed in. Outside, the wind moaned softly through the branches, carrying with it the faintest whisper of the cursed earth's insatiable hunger. As the day wore on, the divide between them seemed to grow, the farm's eerie vitality a constant reminder of the terrible price yet to come. And somewhere deep beneath the soil, the roots twisted and pulsed, hungry for the next sacrifice. The night brought no peace. Mara lay awake, listening to the creaks and whispers of the old farmhouse, her thoughts torn between hope and dread. Eli's obsession was a storm gathering strength, and she feared it would soon break, sweeping them all into its dark wake. But for now, the fragile bond of love held, a slender lifeline against the encroaching shadows. The question lingered in the cold air: how long before even love would not be enough? And with that, the cursed soil waited, patient and relentless, for the next offering. The farmhouse creaked under the weight of years, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and earth. Mara watched Eli from the doorway as he knelt in the garden, his hands buried in the soil. His face was a mask of concentration, eyes dark and haunted. The journal lay open beside him, its faded pages fluttering in the breeze. "You really believe this?" Mara said softly, stepping forward. "That the soil needs blood? That our ancestors made a pact with something unholy?" Eli didn't look up. "It's the only explanation. The crops grew after I made the first sacrifice. I saw it with my own eyes." Mara swallowed hard, the chill of fear creeping up her spine. "And what happens when the soil demands more? What then?" He finally met her gaze, the weight of his burden clear. "Then I'll do what I must." "But what about Sarah?" Mara's voice broke. "What about us?" Eli's jaw tightened. "I'm doing this for her, for all of us." The wind stirred the leaves around them, carrying with it an eerie whisper that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth itself. Mara shivered. "I don't know if I can watch you do this anymore." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cursed land, the fragile threads holding their family together began to fray. The harvest might be bountiful, but the cost was rising, and no one could say how high the price would climb before it broke them all. In the quiet moments before dawn, Mara sat on the porch, staring into the darkness. The farm was still, but the air was thick with unspoken fears. She thought of the journal, the sacrifices, the haunted look in Eli's eyes. Could love survive the curse? Could a family endure the hunger of a land that fed on blood? The answers were buried deep, like roots beneath the soil, waiting to be unearthed. And Mara knew, in her bones, that the next chapter of their story would be written in sacrifice and sorrow. But she would fight for her family, no matter the cost. The earth whispered its secrets, and the night listened. And somewhere, beneath the fallow fields, the cursed soil waited, hungry and patient, for what was to come.